Welcome to the Leader Talks podcast. I'm Reverend Dr. Shannon Carofonda. I am an ordained clergy person in the United Methodist Church.
Hi, I'm Elaine Beatty, speaker, trainer, executive coach.
We've put together this podcast by women for women about things we wish we had known when we were younger.
And we do hope that you will look for our podcast on your favorite platform.
Be sure to subscribe, to like, and to share. We want to thank you for joining us today.
So Shannon, you ready to get started?
Let's do it. Hey friends, welcome back to the Leader Talks podcast. I'm Reverend Dr. Shannon Carofonda, and I'm joined by the amazing coach,
Elaine Beatty. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us once again.
We're so excited to dive into another topic today. Today, we're talking about a courageous pivot.
Courageous pivot. Now, you're going to have to explain that to us. What do you mean by that?
There are several different things I think it can mean, but it's any time when you have to do some sort of pivot in your life that is extremely meaningful and important. So this is not, I changed the type of mascara I'm using. This is more, I'm about to have a child, or I'm going to change career paths, or we need to move across the country. Those types of pivots, they take a bit of courage. And I think there are some skills that we can look at that fit that courageous pivot across the board, but then there are some that are distinctive. So I'm just going to take a moment, if you don't mind, Elaine, to sort of go through my story in two different instances where I had to do this courageous pivot. The first one was early on. I was a computer programmer. I was working for first Price Waterhouse and then for Equitable Real Estate doing asset management computer systems. And I got the distinct call to ministry that I could not run from. God was just right on top of me, just saying, you need to do this. And so I did this really big pivot, quit my job, started seminary, and then started working in the church. And when I was first called to ministry, I was called to youth and children's ministry. So I went into the order of deacons, and I stayed in specialized areas of ministry for years and years, for at least 15 years. And then a couple of years ago, I got a very distinct shift in my call, and God said, you need to be a senior pastor. You are now called to sacraments and order, which is a big part of being an elder in the United Methodist Church, which meant I needed to do a few things to kind of shift and do a courageous pivot. I needed to let people in authority know about this change, and then they wanted to examine me and have me write some paperwork. They wanted to ask some questions, and then they wanted me to serve for 2 years in that role and then come back before them and see if that really stuck. How well did that go? And so I've just finished that entire process, and it's fresh in my mind. And there are times when I knew it was what God was calling me to do, but I was scared. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I don't know what the future holds. There were just a lot of unknowns. And there were certain skills that I think in that situation helped me kind of get through. The first of those were, even though there was a timeline, I needed to release myself from the pressure of that timeline. I needed to realize I don't have to change the world in 2 years. I just need to make sure that this is the right path God is calling me to, and that I'm showing some fruit from that, which doesn't necessarily mean I've doubled the attendance or had at least one baptism. What that meant for me was people saw the call in me, and I tried a whole bunch of different things that I could not do as an associate pastor, but I could do in this context. Like, I didn't go crazy. I didn't start new services where we sat in silence for an hour. I used the context of where I was appointed and said, where can we kind of push some boundaries a little bit to try new things so that I could say, you know what, I tried all of these different things over 2 years, and this is definitely where I'm meant to be. So I think that timeline, we often kind of get in our minds that I need to make sure in the next year that I do 100 million things. What is it they say, Elaine? Something about you overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate, I think it's 5 years, what you can do in 5 years.
Absolutely. But before you go any further, you kind of skipped over the fear part.
So
That's usually where people get stuck.
yeah, I think, yes. And I think for most people, fear is contextual. So what I might find fearful in one situation might not be the same thing you would find fearful in the same situation.
How did you get past the fear? And and you're absolutely right, right? So
Yeah.
what scares me or is not the same for you. What
Yeah.
do you do to get past that?
So, a few things. One is I got a great coach
Hmm.
who had been in a different type of church, who could ask some hard questions without sort of assuming things that they might if they were United Methodist. And he actually slowed me down. I have always thought the church moves too slow. The pastors that I've seen, they need to speed things up. Let's get it going. And he told me after a few months, he said, I wasn't sure you were going to make it at the beginning because you were ready to move way too fast. And I was like, but I thought that was the innovative entrepreneurial spirit that I'm gifted with. And he put me in place and said, no, that would have burned the ship down. Like you can't do that. You have to build and you can't do that quickly. You have to take it day by day and build trust and then test it a little and see if it sticks, which, I know that in the back of my head. And I've heard people say slow down, but I thought they were using it as an excuse. And I learned most likely they weren't. Now, if they'd been there 10 years, they might be using it as an excuse. But, definitely that first year, it was a time for me to not only build trust and relationships, but to observe what was going on in the church, but also within me. How am I reacting to things that are going on, and how am I growing? I think the other thing, one of the things that happens in United Methodism is that if you're a senior pastor, you're itinerant. The bishop could call and say, you got to go over here, which I knew going into it. That didn't scare me as much as that moment when I said I was ready to shift and I didn't know where I was going. So just those few months in between where I had no idea where I was going were really, really scary. And I don't think I got over them. I got through them. I,
Absolutely.
I practiced breath work. I practiced meditation, work with a therapist. My family would ask questions and I would say, you know what? I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get to it.
Right. And that was the point I was making because oftentimes we're making these courageous pivots and it's not just us, right? Like you have a
Right.
whole family, your husband, your two kids, the dog,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how are we going to do this in this season of life? And
parents, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm lived pretty close to my parents, and now it's a lot further. But we got through it, and then there were other challenges and other fears that came along with it. But I was getting confirmation along the way. And so spiritually speaking, I can say I got confirmation of that shift and call from God. And I think anyone who is a believer, whatever faith tradition, um, that there is some sort of knowing, some sort of sense that the divine is at work in your life, and you'll get a confirmation of some kind on that.
I didn't mean to throw you off. I know you were going somewhere, but but you skipped over the fear part
The
and
fear part. Well,
yeah.
I think there's other types of pivots that are also fearful and courageous. So it's not just I'm feeling called to shift, which, someone could say, you know what? I am not satisfied. I'm not doing meaningful work. I need to change careers. That's
Mhm.
sort of what I experienced. That's one type of pivot. Then there's the pivot where you go into work one day and you realize it's your last day and that either the company is downsized or something's happened and you're gone. And at that point, you're also pivoting and you're having to not only be courageous, but also grieve in a sense and deal with all of the emotions of either shame or doubt or all of the things that would come with that. And I think in those cases, it's similar in that, like, who do you rely on? Who is your support system? Do you have a therapist or a coach that you can work with? How's your family? Are they supporting you through this? Those are all of the same things. So I don't think we can underestimate the importance of our family support and then support from professionals. If we are blessed to be able to afford a coach and a therapist, I think everyone should have one.
Too.
And Elaine's a great one. I just think it you're getting the viewpoint of someone who can ask you hard questions that your family may not be able to either see or to ask.
Right. Right. And Shannon and I have experienced, like you, we've experienced these courageous pivots, but that second one you talked about in two different ways. One, I was asked to resign, and that was a shock. And then the second one, literally, the gentleman walked into my hotel and I was shocked to see him there because I'm in Dallas and he was from Houston. So he shows up at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing here? So smart butt over here. And I said, hi. And I said, do we need to go to my office? And he said yes. And so I go in, I sit down behind my big, beautiful brown desk, and I'm general manager now, running a $10 million operation, right? And I said, so we're gathered here today for, and he said, to fire you.
Yeah, that was not on your agenda for the day.
And I said, and because I'm like waiting, and he said, because we don't believe in you. Well, sister, let me tell you something. I had been in management for years. I had been in human resources. I had no comeback to that. Like I was
Oof.
ready for anything, but I had no comeback. What do you say, right? I say all that to say that what you just said, as far as grief, shock, having family, all that happened, right?
Yeah,
But here's the thing, like I'm being released and my entire staff is watching this. So they're like, what is going on with her? And then they had my assistant, who we loved each other dearly, come in and like remove my things, right? Like it was something. But I had to keep it together because my staff was like literally falling apart, right? As they're watching
yeah,
the whole thing. So, when we go through those things, oh my goodness, it's not just us, right?
right.
It's the people around. My dad wanted to jump on a plane and, come back up all my stuff. So, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I lived through it, of course, but yeah, yeah,
Right.
right back there.
What did you do immediately after that was the most helpful?
I called every person I knew who prayed, and I had them pray with me and for me. I couldn't be alone. I was just in the community of people, right? Like,
Right.
and people didn't allow me to be alone, because I mean, this was a job I had prayed for and worked for
Hmm.
15 years, right? But
Yeah.
I was in the middle of a takeover. It was kind of hostile too, right? So one hotel company buying another hotel company, and it was just insanity for like 9 months. And I had three bosses, right? So by the
Mm.
time I had the third one, he was like, I wasn't his girl, really is what it was. But community is essential for
Yeah.
that, right? You don't go it alone. Pastor, friends. I don't think I had a therapist at that moment because I just didn't have one. But yeah, my community of friends and really my church community really just surrounded me.
Yeah. And I think we take community for granted, especially if we're very driven and we put a little too many of our eggs in the career basket. We take the community that we have for granted and we don't build those authentic
Mm-hmm.
relationships that
Mm-hmm.
are just there to call on whenever we need. I'm reading a book right now about our connections, and I'll try to put it in the notes somewhere if I can remember. But basically talking about the mental health crisis can really be solved not with medication, but with connections.
That was beautiful. Absolutely.
I mean, now it's a really big book to say all that. I'm only halfway through, but like that is the gist of it, that there are, family connections, colleagues that are connections, spiritual connections, friendships that are connections, and a whole host of others that we don't have the time, we don't put the time into those that we used to years ago. And when I say years ago, definitely before smartphones, probably before email, but even really before the World War II and probably before the Great Depression. Just because of how cities were built,
Yeah,
how neighborhoods were built, we had communities that functioned differently than they do now. And while we've gained a lot with that, we've also lost a lot with that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, if you're intentionally making a pivot for yourself, is, I mean, obviously network, but fall on your strengths. And if you don't know what those are, do a lot of self-discovery to figure those out. Take some personality tests, ask friends and people that you used to work with, like, hey, what would you rank as my top three strengths? And see, like, are you consistent on certain things? And really lean into those. And I would also say that in those moments, in either type of pivot, pivots are tiring. They can be exhausting. And we get really excited when we start the new thing that we tend to spend a little bit more time because there's that learning curve and we kind of want to get over that, but we often don't realize that's exhausting us.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're going to hit that wall if we don't like take our time, take a Sabbath, take at least a day and just rest.
Absolutely, to shift because I mean our whole body has to like realign, right? And just recognize like what just happened, you know. And I just want to just kind of reiterate, you know, Reverend Shannon and I discussed this podcast a couple years ago, and we did it purposely for our sisters who are moving up the ranks in leadership. And we, you know, we said to ourselves like what would we have wanted to know, right, years ago? And so, you know, our purpose here is to make sure that we're sharing our lessons learned with you all. Now, again, we say for women, but certainly can be for men. But
Right.
I want to go back to what you said, which I thought was really significant about connections. You know, we are leaders in organizations, we're pastors, you know, we're therapists, we're mothers, we're sisters, you know what I mean? We have all these roles. So, how do we do that and still keep our connection?
Oh, how do we do all the things and still keep connections? I think we have to be intentional about them. We have to
Absolutely.
look at our calendar and realize I haven't just sat and watched TV with my family in weeks. I have to just sit down and or go for a walk or go for a hike, whatever it is that you do that you enjoy doing together. If you have to calendar it, calendar it.
Yes, Melanie.
And yeah,
I
and I would also say that, you know, as we are looking at our calendars and we're doing all those things, also look at doing new things every so often. You might not think, well, I don't have room to go take a cooking class. Well, you can make room to go take a cooking class and doing new things that are kind of in a different area than what we're used to helps us to grow and stretch because we're doing something that's kind of outside of that comfort zone. Now, I would never do that in the middle of a pivot just because, again, you're going to exhaust yourself unless that's what feeds your passion. I mean, some people, they're constantly wanting to do new things and that might be beneficial to them. But for the most part, every so often, quarterly, maybe do one thing you have not done before, or at least do something in a new way that you've not done it that way before. I think it's very
I
helpful. I don't know how I would write sermons without doing new things because people would get really tired of the same old stories of my family or me growing up or whatever. I need to be able to do new things because then I can reach new people in new ways. If I've never taken a cooking class and I don't ever cook, then I might not know the joy someone else has. I mean, I might take a cooking class and still hate it. And I don't hate cooking. It's just an example. But I might see the joy someone else has and realize, you know what? That translates into something else over in my professional life, or I learned something from that person. And I think it's still a good skill. I did take a cooking class when I was in my 20s. The company I worked for and this was a great company, they would give you so many dollars every year to go do things like that. So my husband and I took golf lessons one year. I took a guitar lessons one year. I cannot play a single chord on the guitar, so it did not stick. It was a lot harder than I thought, even though I was musically inclined. It was a lot harder. And then there were like three or four of us from the office that went to go do a cooking class at like somewhere. I can't really remember where, but I got this recipe for almond joy cheesecake that I still have and is still amazing. Now, I hardly ever make it because I don't even I think I lost my spring form pan somewhere, but it was good. Right, right. I also think that, those are big categories of pivot. I've gotten fired or I'm changing careers. But I think there are small pivots that happen every day and we just don't realize it. And I think if a big one happens and we can realize, you know what, like I had to go to work a different way. Well, that's a pivot. It's not a big one. And you might have complained when that happened, or you might have been like, oh, this is actually an easier route. I like this. That's something I think to be mindful of. We do get in routines, and I think routines are helpful for us because some of the things that we do by rote help free up our brain
hmm
to kind of live in a more creative space. So this is kind of why when I drive to the church, I'm kind of on autopilot. It's like boom, 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 two turns, I'm there. I can sometimes get to church and not even realize I knew I drove the entire way, but it's a routine, and I do that same routine on a regular basis. But then there's that moment when I'm like, it's a beautiful day out and it's not that far. I'm gonna walk. Completely changes my point of view. But there's some days where I gotta drive because there's no other choice. And then when I get to where I'm going, I can truly focus because I haven't been worrying about trying to go a new way, if that makes any sense.
And it was
Say it
fat.
loud, yes. Yeah, right. And that's not necessarily a courageous one, but that's a good and healthy one, I think. And I
Mhm.
think it helps you realize, oh, I did it small here. I might be able to do something a little bit bigger over here. Well, this has been a joy. I've really enjoyed this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, contact us. If there's a topic you want to hear on the podcast, just let us know. I would say after a while of wrestling with it, just do it. Don't wait. You're not going to get it right no matter how long you wait. So just take that first step and it'll make all the difference. All right, bye.